Welcome to the UK's first metal detection podcast. It's All Metal Mode UK with your host from across the pond, Mr. Michael Hare.
Hello everybody, this is Mike here, and you're listening to the All Metal Mode UK podcast. And welcome in, some people joining the chat, I do believe. And tonight, I am very excited. I know Dave has been looking forward to this since we first got this going. Very, very fun guest. We had him on the United States show the other day, Tuesday, and what a great speaker, great storyteller, Mr. Randall Sullivan. He just wrote the book Curse of Oak Island, the story of the world's longest treasure hunt. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to want to get that. I know it's out right now on Amazon, but I'm getting it on order, and wow, just after talking to Randall the other night, just amazing. How you doing, Dave?
I'm marvelous. How's yourself, my friend?
I am very good, very good.
Good. Been a busy all week, but I've finished now for 12 days anyway from work, so I can start concentrating on the magazine and get it populated again.
All right, good job. Good job. I bet you've been busy.
Oh, mate, it's been absolutely mayhem. Absolutely. It's usually quiet at this time of the year when I work at JCB, and it's just been the most manic period of time I can remember for some time. It's like all the orders have come through at once, so madness.
One thing I want to mention, I suspect quite a few questions will come up from the chat. Save them till the end. Once the show's kind of wrapping up, we'll ask if anybody has any questions, just so it's easier to follow along. Marvelous.
And I'd just like to give a brief update as well. The guest that we had last week on, Mike Smith, regarding the Celtic chariot find in Pembrokeshire in South Wales. There was a programme on last night on BBC4 in the UK called Digging Britain, and the subject was actually covered on the programme. So if anybody wants to look at that and catch up on iPlayer in the UK on BBC4, Digging Britain contained the Celtic chariot from Mike of last week.
That is cool. Very cool.
So I haven't watched it yet. I've recorded it, so I've got that to tape anyway. So there you go.
Yeah, I'll have to watch it. I can get that here, and I actually watched that show. How long's that been out?
I honestly couldn't remember, Mike. I obviously miss a lot of it. And to be fair, out of all the programs I watch, historical, archaeological, etc., there's one that I don't miss. And do you know what that is, Mike?
What's that?
Well, it's my segue. It's the Curse of Oak Island.
Really? Yeah,
it is.
I am caught up. It's funny because I was not caught up the other night when we talked to Randall, and it was funny because the next episode, I was like 3 behind. The next episode, he'd called in and he was talking to the Laginas and stuff, and I thought, how cool was that? So yeah, and they showed where he'd been on the show before, and wow, that was really neat. But I'll tell you, the Curse of Oak Island is at the top of my list. Absolutely one of my favorite shows. But I'll tell you, lately, after doing this show, I told you, I think last week, I watch more shows from England that are over in England than I do American shows now. I've really gotten into some really good shows. So,
well, the thing you've got at the moment is a lot of luck, obviously, because of the the recording in the US. The Curse of Oak Island's currently on, I don't know, episode 6 or 7. We've not started it in the UK yet, so I've not seen any of the season 6 whatsoever.
Oh, you're missing out. There's some really good stuff going on right now.
And I keep seeing all these spoilers popping up, and I'm like, no, sorry, go away, delete. Anyway, on the back of that, tonight we'd like to welcome Randall Sullivan, author of The Curse of Oak Island, the story of the world's longest treasure hunt, and multiple other books, quite a few other books, and also former editor at Rolling Stone, am I right, Randall?
Contributing editor was the title.
Contributing editor. Marvellous. So, good evening, and obviously thank you for not only being on the show on Tuesday night in America, but for taking the time out to appear today as well. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
Happy to be here.
So, I'll dive right into it. If you wouldn't mind, could you briefly introduce yourself to the audience?
Well, I'm primarily an author, but I do work in movies and television some. I was a contributing editor at Rolling Stone magazine for more than 20 years, so that occupied a fair percentage of my career. One of my other books was just recently made into a film that starring Johnny Depp that will be out in the spring, late spring or early summer. That's called City of Lies. Another of my books, The Miracle Detective, was the basis of a show that ran on the Oprah Winfrey Network, and I was the host of that. So, I don't know how much more you want me to boast.
So the boasting, the introduction's out of the way, and obviously I'm very excited to speak to you about Oak Island and your involvement in the mysteries there. And to be honest, Randall, I'm not dissimilar to the Laguna brothers. My interest stems from around 1984, 30 years ago. 34 years ago. I'm miscounting there. When I was about 10, and my father had a book, Paranormal and Mysteries and such like, and in it was a chapter of Oak Island, and that stayed with me till today. I can still remember it vividly. I've actually looked through books the past couple of weeks trying to find it if I've actually still got the book myself, but unfortunately I haven't. And as I said to Mike in the pre-show, for those who are old enough, there was a film back in the late 80s called The Money Pit. And I was so excited to see it because The Money Pit was the article's name, and I put it on and it was Tom Hanks in an old house. So obviously thanks thereafter go to the producers of The Curse of Oak Island and the likes of yourselves, because it's actually fueled me again. So that's where my interest lies in the mysteries of Oak Island. So again, in the UK, the mystery isn't as prominent as it is in America. Would you be able to introduce the Curse for Oak Island for the listeners, please?
Well, the treasure hunt itself goes back at least to the year 1795. What exactly happened in 1795, we can't know precisely because there are several different accounts. They're very similar. They agree mostly, but there are some details different. But the gist of it is these three young men, teenagers, found a sort of a sunken circle, a slight depression in the ground on Oak Island that was very suggestive to them because there were the stumps of old oak trees that had been cut down and younger oak trees growing inside or around this circular depression. So they were convinced this might be buried treasure, and what the best piece of evidence they had was an old wooden tackle block hanging from the limb of one of the big old oak trees hanging over the clearing. So they began to dig, got down about 2 or 3 feet, and found what was essentially a patio of flagstones that clearly had been placed there by hand. They were very excited. They tore apart the flagstones and discovered that they were really, at the entrance to a pit, because the ground outside the circle, the sound outside the circle. Sorry, I've got a phone call coming in I wasn't prepared for. The ground, the edge of the circle was rock hard clay, but inside it was all loose dirt. So they began to dig down into that soft dirt. They got down 10 feet and they struck wood. They thought we found the treasure chest, but it turned out it was a platform of logs that had been placed in the sort of wedged into the pit to form, a floor. They were baffled by whoever would do this, but to convince them, wow, there must be something really valuable down there. And so they tore out that platform of logs, dug down another 10 feet, and hit another platform of logs, placed the same way, with the ends wedged into the hard outside of the pit. At that point, they looked up and saw 20 feet of clay. Realized they could be buried alive, so they backed off, covered it up, and started to look for someone who could finance a real search. And that took. It was almost 10 years later. It was like 7 or 8 years later when they found people willing to pay for a real expedition, which it really was. They all sailed to Oak Island on a sloop that came around the Bay of Fundy. It was 200 and some miles. They were essentially, they were using pretty primitive equipment, but better than what they had before. It was basically shovels and buckets and pulleys, but they were able to dig down by creating a wooden cribbing, which allowed them to go deeper, which held the sides of the pit in place. So they dug down to 30 feet and they struck another wooden platform. They hit yet another wooden platform at 40 feet, another at 50 feet, another at 60 feet, another at 70 feet, another at 80 feet, and at 90 feet, there was yet another one, but this one had a stone laying in the center of it. It was just a large, heavy, flat stone. From when they first found it, they flipped it over, and there was some kind of carving in it. Whether that was letters and figures or just figures, there's some disagreement among the accounts. But the most reliable says it was just figures. Anyway, they pulled the stone out, and immediately the pit water began to seep into the pit. They didn't know what exactly had happened, but it was, they were now kind of digging mud. It was dusk by then. They retired for the evening, and when they came back the next morning, the pit was full of water to the 65-foot level. And that water has essentially defeated all efforts to get down there and find out what's in the pit ever since. In part because those early efforts to get access to it created a huge mess around the area known as the Money Pit, and so what was already a pretty complex engineering issue became exponentially more difficult. But at least that did force people to start looking at the rest of the island. And when they tried to trace the flood system to the beach at Smith's Cove, which is near on the island, they discovered this man-made beach that was almost as fantastic as the Money Pit itself. And so it's and each of these things was a little bit more verified because there were more witnesses, a larger circle of people involved. And really, it was a man-made beach that sort of really made news in Nova Scotia and spread because people realized this is something. I mean, who would do something so incredible? There has to be an incredible reason. People have been trying to figure out what that reason was ever since.
Mm. You mentioned about the stone tablet with the potential numbers on. Am I right in saying that's the tablet that suggests in runic type inscriptions it's been deciphered as saying 40 feet below 2 million pounds are buried?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in that supposed translation. I mean, I think for some reason, no one ever made a rubbing or took a photograph of the stone. So you only have the claims of a couple of people, and this was 50 years later, or more than that actually, what was on the stone, and they may have had motives, that weren't entirely pure. But I personally don't believe that either those figures were the figures, or that the translation is accurate. I think the truth is, today nobody knows exactly what was on that stone, because the stone, even though it was one of the original three searchers, put it in his fireplace, and dozens of people trooped through his house to look at it and marvel at it, but no one ever made a rubbing or a copy of it for some reason. And eventually it was removed from the fireplace by another person involved in the treasure hunt, and got transferred, used as basically a display at a bookbinding business in Halifax, and then it disappeared from there in the late 19th century and has never been seen again.
It's interesting with the bookbindery, because obviously there's a potential piece of bookbindery actually found at the site not long, in the last season, wasn't there? So that's just occurred to me. I've got another question and it's not a question to you, but it's a question that could be brought up in not dissimilar as well, if this stone tablet actually existed or not. Why is there no historical documentation of the workforce and the engineering that took part in creating what is on or what could be on Oak Island? There's no evidence that it took place other than it actually being there, really, is there?
Well, there's certainly no documentary evidence of involving who did the original work or works. I mean, it may not have been done all at the same time. That's another question. True. But there's absolutely nothing that tells us what it was, except that it was something. I mean, what is certain is that someone did extraordinary works on Oak Island, and it's difficult for anyone to believe that people would do something so fantastic unless they had a fantastic purpose. But no one, there are obviously dozens of theories about it, some more plausible than others, but they're all still just theories. There is no solid evidence, no conclusive evidence that supports any of them.
And again, unfortunately, in the UK, we're not privy to what evidence has been found, if any, this season. So we're all waiting with bated breath. And regarding the theories, I mean, I know myself, there's multiple from Francis Drake to William Kidd the pirate to the Holy Man and Arif to the Francis Bacon manuscripts to Norsemen and early Welsh rovers there's even links to Rensley Chateau, the Arcadian treasure also. So I haven't even scraped the list nearly of theories, have I?
I mean, it's quite remarkable now, looking back on the basis of what we know, that for the first 100 years, it was always thought to be Captain Kidd's treasure. That's how it was referred to, described, what people believed it was. But if you go back and look at what the world was like then, and what people understood, and what stories were prevalent, it's much more understandable that was the original idea. I mean, Captain Kidd, as I discovered in researching this book, was a much more complicated and sympathetic character than I'd ever imagined. But the people of that time, the myth of Captain Kidd was, history. It was what they believed, and so they held on to it. It was really just about 100 years after the Money Pit was originally discovered that people started proposing alternative theories.
So, how did your initial involvement in Oak Island come about? Was that via the Rolling Stone magazine?
Yeah, I was working for Rolling Stone magazine, and I just had gotten the idea. I mean, I just was sort of thirsting for some sort of different kind of adventure, and was just probing around in various manuscripts for historical mysteries, unsolved mysteries and came across, the story of this treasure hunt that had gone on at that point for more than 200 years. And I was flabbergasted, for one, just that, people could keep hunting for the same treasure in the same place for over 200 years, but then all of the mysteries that had been uncovered and just the drama of the story. I mean, 6 people had lost their lives in the treasure hunt. Many, many more than that had lost either their fortunes or their minds. So it was a really compelling story.
So how did you mentioned about the 6 people who've passed away in relation to the legend. Where did the legend actually come from? I actually don't know that myself.
No, the legend of what? Of the story itself, or of
the legend of the 7 people are supposed to be died before you actually found the treasure.
Yeah, well, I think that's a fairly recent origin, and it's conveniently dramatic considering that 6 people have died. So
yeah,
who will be the 7th? But I mean that story had been, I heard it from one person when I was on Oak Island in 2003, but obviously the show has embraced it because of the dramatic tension it creates, and because searching on Oak Island does pose dangers. I mean, those guys have taken some risks going down there, so it is entirely possible that there will be a 7th person.
Mm. It's, I mean, the mysteries itself. There's so many things attached to Oak Island. There's so many potential things that could be brought up in relation to it. It is an international, interesting story because of the amount of things that are going on, and obviously kudos to the Laguna brothers for taking on the risks involved of, the money pit, throwing all the money into the money pit. I mean, we've also had numerous other companies' involvement. Am I right in saying the Onslow Company, Truro, Eldorado, the Oak Island Treasure, and Triton Allowance? So this isn't the first time, and there's obviously been a lot of excavation on the site. Is there an issue with all the previous excavations and such like that's been done, that's muddying the waters somewhat in relation to the story that's now being told or found?
Yeah, well, it's literally muddying the waters a whole lot, because in those early days, all the only ideas they had for how to get down there were either mostly to dig another shaft nearby and then tunnel to the money pit, either in the hope of diverting the water or getting down below the flood tunnel, or finding the flood tunnel and blocking it. So over the succeeding half-century, that little hill, Drumlin as it's known geographically, just got riddled with shafts and tunnels, which, and in 1861, the whole thing collapsed. So tens of thousands of board feet of timber that was used for cribbing fell down in there, and the original shaft itself collapsed sort of sideways. So, I mean, it's become really exponentially more difficult to get to the original source, and it's because you're constantly finding things. What you do find is maybe an artifact of an earlier search, or it could be from the original works, or there could be more than one original work. The work could have started at a much earlier date than it was finished.
I've got a quick question. It kind of doesn't fit in where we're at right now, but it's really been on my mind since you and I talked the other night, Randall, and that is, I mean, of course I know you couldn't tell us, but you are, I have to assume, especially after watching the other night and you were talking to the Lagunas and stuff on the show, you are probably privy to some information that you can't even tell us, I would suspect.
Well, about this season's shows, you're right. I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. So that, I can't talk about anything that hasn't already aired. So I'm limited to that. I mean, I can describe generally. They gave me permission to describe generally what they're doing this year. I mean, the most impressive thing to me by far was this dam they built at Smith's Cove, which could literally hold the ocean. They've moved the ocean back, 40 feet with this massive dam, which is something that people have been trying to do for 2 centuries, and were always unsuccessful. The dams would always get wiped out by a storm, but they actually built one that has held and allowed them to really explore that ground.
Now, as I've watched this show, I have to say I have loved at how they've gone about this. I feel like they're examining every possibility. They're dotting their I's and crossing their T's. I like where they're always going with it. Has there been any? Do you agree with that, or is there things that you'd like to see them do, or areas you feel like they should work on more, or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I have made suggestions to them that they haven't taken, but that said, they've done an extraordinary amount of work, and these guys are very committed to it. I mean, I understand that it's television, and people might imagine that things are being sort of fabricated for dramatic purposes, but that's not the case. I mean, they certainly play with time and sequence, and they do television, stuff. But the actual search itself is authentic, and these two brothers and their partners are entirely earnest in their search. I mean, Rick and Marty didn't get the island to do a TV show. They had no idea. They weren't even thinking of it. They got the island to continue the search, and then a few years later, a television producer found them and convinced them to do the show. And the producer admitted to me he really had to convince them to do the show. They didn't want to do it, and Rick in particular really resisted. So that wasn't their purpose. Their purpose really was this fascination with Oak Island, and the hope that they could figure out what happened there.
Yeah, that I've always sensed that they are very genuine, and like I said, I'm a pretty leery guy. I'm a pretty cautious guy, and just because it's reality doesn't mean it's always reality. But I have always felt like this show is very legit, and what they're doing is very passionate to them and important, and it's not about a TV show to them.
Absolutely. One of the things both brothers, in separate conversations when I first went back to the island in 2016 and joined the cast of the show for a little while, was they both told me separately that the first episode had ended with this discovery of a Spanish coin in the swamp, and they both admitted to me they had suspicion that the producers might have placed it there, and that they really, they warned the producers that if we find out you did that, the show's over. And they were very serious, and they really questioned the producers intensely. And by then I knew the producers well enough to feel fairly confident they would never do something like that. But it was more that Rick and Marty were so adamant about, anything gets faked, we're done.
Right. So the more I watch, the more I think it is just I've wondered with the things found around the island in the span of time. Do you think things have made its way out of where it was buried? I mean, some of the things that have been found on the island have to be related. They don't fit to the island otherwise, and it's made me wonder if some of the stuff has been washed out, and it leads me more to believe it is some kind of treasure trove that, like you've discussed, either it was brought, it was been used for a long time by different people, or it was a mass collection that spanned the ages.
Well, those are both possibilities that I certainly wouldn't dismiss. I always felt, even when I went back there the first time in 2003, it was difficult for me to believe that anybody would have done this scale of work to conceal a treasure of gold or silver or something of monetary value. Although I don't dismiss that. There's certainly evidence that links to at least a couple of theories that involve treasure that are persuasive. But I always thought it had to be some larger purpose, some, almost semi-religious kind of purpose that would drive people to do something like this.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm probably more disposed to look at those theories, be sympathetic to those theories than I am the simple treasure theories. But I look at everything.
Randall, I've got to give it back. Dave is the nicest guy in the world, but I'll bet you right now, he is so into this story, he's probably pouting right now. And that's not like Dave. It's just because of what the story is. I can see Dave over there, arms crossed, pouting like Mike.
I'm doing even more research as we speak. Little indicators are popping up in my head, so I'm doing a bit of research at the same time. So don't worry about that.
I just want to say one more thing, and I want to give it back over to Dave. If they ever say to you, "Hey, Randall, do you know a fat guy that metal detects and has some different metal detectors and love to come metal detect?" Keep me in mind, buddy. Keep me in mind. Go ahead, Dave. I apologize. I kind of jumped in there and took over for a few minutes.
Oh, don't worry about it. It's your show, my friend. You mentioned the dammed area while you were talking a moment ago. And that is suggested, is that the place that suggested there may be a sunken ship of some variety?
Well, there is a theory that by one of the most dedicated, long-time Oak Island investigators, a surveyor named Fred Nolan. He made a pretty convincing argument that Oak Island had once been two islands that were joined by the work of men. Because the island shape is that it's about almost a mile long, but it's sort of, people call it peanut shape because it sort of has a narrow waist that is this lowland marsh that connects the two islands. And so he was really focused on that, on the swamp, the marsh, because he thought that was his theory was that someone had sailed a ship in there, sunk it with the treasure, and then kind of join the two islands as a way to conceal that.
And there's another again, while I've been reading before the show, there's another island locally called Frog Island, and the book that I've been reading suggests that there's something not dissimilar there as well. Yeah,
I've heard that. I mean, Frog Island is so tiny, you couldn't do. I mean, it's literally a dot of land. So yeah, but I mean, I guess I've heard one person make a sort of a case, and not a very good case, that there's a underground link between Frog Island and Oak Island, but there's been absolutely no evidence found to support it. I mean, one thing that does complicate it is that the sea level has risen quite, like 30 feet since 1795. And so a lot of what was offshore in those early days, whenever this work was done, is underwater now, which is something that I've always thought was really significant, and was pushing on the Laginas whenever they would ask me what I thought, because I believe there's something, there is some access, some tunnel into the money pit, or into wherever the original depository was. That was, is now underwater. It was offshore then, but is underwater now.
So obviously, I mean, another one of the theories that have been bandied about for years. Yeah, totally understand. So there's a pretty large cast. There's the mainstay of the cast, the main people: Marty and Rick, Charles Barkhouse, Jack Begley, Dave Blankenship, Craig Tester, Dan Blankenship, and Gary Drayton. Now, in the UK, obviously, since this show has become more and more prominent, Gary Drayton being from England himself, and there's a lot of people that I know who know Gary Drayton. He's been the metal detectorist on the site. Have you been privy to Gary Drayton's work at all?
Yeah, a bit. I mean, he and I hung out a little last summer, and he was showing me around because he was running the metal detector over that ground that had been exposed after they pushed back the ocean with the dam.
Uh-huh.
I mean, if anybody knows Gary is a charming and witty fellow. and really, tremendously enthusiastic about what he does. And he's made some really. I mean, he made actually what some people could argue was the most significant find the summer before last, when with his metal detector he discovered a cross that's been dated to the 13th century.
Yeah.
And that matches. I mean, I've been very dismissive of the Knights Templar theory, but it does, as it happens, that cross matches almost exactly a drawing of a cross that was made on the wall at Dome Prison in France, where the Templars were held before they were executed. So, there's stuff like that forces you to back up and say, all right, I can't rule this one out either. But so that of all Gary's finds, I think that's the most impressive. But he's found a bunch of coins and buttons and bits and pieces of stuff that all are suggestive of the problem being they suggest two or three possible theories. They're not entirely consistent with each other.
Yeah, I mean, there was also the brooch with the garnet stone, the 17th century Spanish coin. Now there's also the Roman sword that was allegedly found at Oak Island. Can you elaborate on that? Because obviously, is that connected to the people currently involved in the site excavation, or is that something else entirely?
Yeah, I mean, I hate. I'm sorry. I have to play the role I hate here of the debunker. But the sword was basically a fake. I mean, it was something modern that one person tried to pass off as an ancient Roman sword. It wasn't. It was a replica made, like in the 19th century. And so it's I think it's something that was planted, or somebody lost it, in Mahone Bay where Oak Island is, and tried to make some connection to Oak Island. But really, I just think it's a discardable piece of evidence.
I'm actually glad that you've given that it's the information on it, because obviously if you look on the internet, if you look for treasures found on Oak Island, for instance, it pops up everywhere. And obviously that would totally muddy the waters for historical research by suggesting that the Romans were actually in the area. So, yeah, it's great that it's been found to have been a more modern artifact, let's say.
Are we talking about? Are you talking about the what they thought was a crossbow bolt that turned into be?
No.
A Roman sword, allegedly.
Yeah, there was a sword, an actual sword that was identical, at least in shape and construction, to the short sword used by the Roman centurions, but it wasn't. It didn't date to Roman times or anything. Okay, it was a modern replica.
Hey, are you guys are we okay for a 2-minute break?
Certainly, my friend.
Okay, sure. We'll be back in 2 minutes, guys. Real quick here.
Ho, ho, ho. If you're looking for some great gift ideas for this Christmas, why not get yourself over to LP? They have lots of amazing deals this Christmas. They also stock a wide range of machines, from Minelab to Garrett, Nocta Macro, and XP. They also sell gift vouchers too. Check out the website for some amazing deals at www.lpmetaldetecting.com or give them a call 01635 597 975. Ho ho ho! Merry Christmas from LP.
The Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine acts as a hub for information, offering articles from archaeologists, detectorists and other specialists throughout the genre, featuring many links, event info and news articles associated to archaeology and metal detecting. We also offer professional review services and promotion for books, resources, videos, documentaries, gadgets, equipment and much, much more. The magazine is run by the archaeological and metal detecting community for the archaeological and metal detecting community. So come visit us at archmdmag.com. That's archmdmag.com. And check out information from our media section with all the latest content, news from the Archaeology Channel, podcast, and the YouTube channels that feature the now legendary Digger Dawn, The Man with the Hat, and Archeo Duck, just to name a few. If you would like to offer an article, link, or inquire about other services, then pay us a visit at archmdmag.com and drop us a line.
All right, we're back. Dave, sorry about that. Do you know where you were at?
Of course I do.
Good deal. Go ahead.
Oh, I was waiting for you to go and talk about something then. So, yeah, we were talking about artifacts and such like that that have been found or allegedly found. And I think I'm right in saying that they've got a building set up now on the island which acts as a museum for over 600 artifacts that they've recovered themselves.
That's correct, and it's the one part of the island that's accessible to visitors, which no part of the island was accessible even as recently as 2016. But now people can drive onto the island and visit the museum and look at that stuff themselves. And so for those who have that level of fascination with Oak Island, it seems to really be thrilling to them to actually be able to set foot on Oak Island. It was fun to watch last summer.
Mm-hmm. I'm very lucky. I've got a friend and colleague in Nova Scotia called Paul Kimball, who's a TV and movie producer, and obviously being friends with him for so long, he's invited me over to Halifax to stay whenever I want, and I've got a bucket list of places I'd like to go. The obvious is there, the pyramids in Mexico, the Peruvian Nazca lines, and right at the top is over to visit Paul, take a look around Nova Scotia, and obviously attempt to visit the island itself. So yeah, it's on. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but it's right up there. Again, for people who don't know much about the or have a limited knowledge of Oak Island's mysteries, we've also had a presidential involvement in the past too.
We have indeed. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was actually on the island as a treasure hunter, and in the early part of the 20th century, and maintained an active interest in what was going on there, even after he was elected president. There's correspondence between him and various people who were involved in the treasure hunt that he exchanged while he was, had been reelected president, and was, trying to get us out of the Depression and preparing for World War II, and he still had time to try to, keep up to date on what was going on Oak Island.
So, and obviously there's been alleged Masonic involvement. We've seen that in the series. Another question I have, jumping about, because I've just spotted it on my piece of paper. Obviously, you've now got access to the majority, if not all, of the island. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, to the entire island at this point.
Right.
I mean, I suppose there is still some ambiguity about Fred Nolan's property, but I think they're permitted to go on it. I don't know if they can.
Yeah. So, in respects to that, I know there's many bits of the TV series where they're appearing in different parts of the island where they wouldn't normally. There was a depression found in the last season, if I remember correctly, which they, along with the archaeologist who's on site, excavated to see if it was anything of consequence. But is there anyone who's actually participating in a all-round search for potential other access points, i.e. the underground workings that were there, the tunnels and what have you? Is there any potential that they may be found in an access point within the island itself?
I mean, I have to admit I'm skeptical about that because virtually every inch of the island that is above water has been scoured by various searchers. Like I said earlier, there certainly are tunnels into the money pit and into the island. I mean, those have been demonstrated to exist. Actually, they were found by Dan Blankenship in kind of a remarkable way, which was, Mahone Bay. It got cold enough for Mahone Bay to freeze over, but he was still running pumps in the money pit, and that would stir up water and heat it up enough that 3 holes opened up out in the ice, and he could see that they would open or close depending on whether he was running that pump in the money pit. So, or I guess it may have been borehole 10X, but point being that there are at least 3 tunnels from the south shore that go into the island, and they're far enough offshore that they're probably right at the edge of what would have been the water line back in, say, 1750.
Wow.
Fascinating. Every single thing's fascinating. I could go on all night. I know you've not got all night yourself. But, when you do leave us around 9 o'clock, me and Mike are going to continue. I'm going to try and go through some of the other questions that I think people who are investigating it from whatever angle, if it's historical or actually fully involved on the site, what they must ask themselves. And obviously we're going to discuss the finds that have been made, etc. as well. But again, with your involvement, have you felt that you've learned more now than you did 10 years ago?
Oh, for certain. I mean, when I went back this time to do this book, I decided that I was really going to question everything, including all of the details of the origin story. And I give Marty Lagina some credit for that, because he and I were talking at breakfast one day, and he was just questioning the whole thing and saying, we don't even know if Daniel McGinnis existed. Daniel McGinnis being the supposed 16-year-old boy who found the money pit. So that really launched me on a search to go back into the historical record, the genealogical record, what we could find. And it really satisfied me that the original story was substantially authentic, and that it really did happen. And it really did happen pretty much like it was described in the early accounts. Two things I became absolutely sure of was that both of the sort of debunker theories that are out there are completely bogus. I mean, they've been created by cherry picking the facts, or by people who don't know the facts. But one of them is that this is some natural phenomenon that people mistook for man-made. Well, that's just not true. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming, and their claims about how that happened are easily disproven. But the other is that it was some sort of hoax, and that is certainly not true. Because when you look back into the record, you see that these people, they believed so completely in that there was a treasure that they committed their lives, their fortunes, their entire beings, and generations of their family to the treasure hunt. They never tried to exploit it by offering, saying, pay me and I'll let you dig for treasure, or I'll sell you the land where the treasure is, or, they held on to the land, and any deal they made with somebody who wanted to hunt treasure was for a piece of the treasure, never to try to get money. So it's very clear to me that all of those early searchers in the 18th and 19th century believed absolutely that there was a treasure there.
Including the property owners and all of that.
All of it. All of it. I mean, I was really impressed by how well, the basic story, the foundation story, which is what skeptics call the myth, holds up under examination.
I'm waiting for you to speak then, Mike.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I've got a question. I was just waiting for you. Now, when you watch this show, really, Gary Drayton's involvement is pretty minimal. Has he extensively metal detected? I mean, I would assume part of the cast and always on the show that we just get to see a little bit of him metal detecting, but I have to think that he has covered vast amounts of the island and spends a lot more time metal detecting than we see.
Whenever I've seen him, when I was there in September this past year, I mean, Gary was out there metal detecting when there was no camera on. I mean, he wasn't performing for the show. He was just combing the ground. The guy loves what he does. I mean, I'm sure some of your people are familiar with his background. He was a mudlarker in England as a youth, which you may correct me on this, but I think a mudlarker is somebody who basically explores riverbanks, and somehow that got him into an opportunity to work with people who were exploring shipwrecks, trying to find treasure and studying artifacts and things like that. And so by the time they brought him to Oak Island, he had a vast trove of experience. He's often been, when something is found, he's identified what it is before any of the others, because he recognizes that, oh yeah, that's a plank from a ship, from a Spanish galleon, or from the floor plank from a Spanish galleon, or it's this bracket. I mean, Gary does have a vast knowledge, and he's a charming, enthusiastic, very likable fellow.
You definitely. I mean, I want to go over a few questions we went over the other night, especially since a lot of two different listening groups. You obviously believe in the treasure. I know that, and I think anybody listening tonight would know that. What would you say to the skeptics?
Well, I would correct that to say I believe something fantastic was done there for some purpose, whether it was to deposit and I do think it was the deposit of some sort of what could be called treasure, but it may have been historical treasure, not gold or silver, something like that. But to the skeptics, I would say, well, look at all the evidence that supports that theory, and what have you got to argue it with? And generally, I mean, the people who have made the skeptic case, they either cherry pick or totally abuse the known facts. I mean, they're far more, as far as I'm concerned, dishonest and inconsistent in the way they try to prove their case with the known facts. And the skeptic position was first taken by actually it was the guy who brought FDR to the island, Colonel Henry Bowden, and he was not successful in his treasure hunt, and the guy who controlled the island said, "Okay, I'm done with you. You're not getting it done." And Bowden threatened him that, I'm going to, I'll put out some kind of bad, damaging publicity if you don't, give me another chance. And when he wasn't given another chance, he wrote an article for Collier's magazine saying, "Oh, this whole thing's bogus. It's a combination of, natural phenomena and hoax." But almost everything he wrote was not true.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I would, if you don't mind, since you have spent time on the island with the people we see on the show on a regular basis, the Laginas, Barkhouse, Blankenships, everybody, what was your time with them like? What were they like as people?
When I first went to Oak Island in 2003, Dan Blankenship was my primary source, and he was really the only way on the island. In those days, they weren't letting anybody on Oak Island, hadn't let anybody on in some number of years, and Dan was the only one, and his wife, Jane, were the only ones on the island at that time. So I had to approach him, and he was a crusty, cantankerous, but really formidable man. I mean, even, he was, 80 then, or I think, and or just about 80, and still kind of a guy you wouldn't want to get in a bar fight with. I mean, he was a very formidable guy, and so charming him into letting me just come onto the island and hang out with him a little was the key thing. And then once he got going, once he started showing me things and telling the story, he just, the momentum of it just took him over, and he told me everything. And that was what really made that Rolling Stone article, as good as it was, is that all the help I got from him. And because it was just years and years of absolute obsession with Oak Island by someone who is an intelligent, driven, formidable man.
Yes.
That made it quite compelling. And I think it's, Dan had, I think something of an uneasy relationship with the Laginas at first. And I think a lot of it is he just, surrendering control after all the having it was really difficult. And, when he questioned them, Marty was able to get, the Laginas were able to get the island because Marty had made a huge amount of money selling an energy company he owned. And so that gave him the resources to buy in. And maybe Dan was suspicious about that. He always was calling the Italians, when I talked to him about it like that with some kind of Jordan or something. But Marty and Rick are they're very different. But they're both very earnest. And Marty is much more of a hard-headed pragmatist, skeptic, a show me kind of a guy who is all about the what we can actually bring up from underground, whereas Rick is more fascinated by the mystery and the romance of it, and honestly, he's probably less interested in the treasure than he is in the story, what it was all about.
Right.
If he could solve the mystery of what it was, I don't think he'd be that disappointed that if he didn't actually find any treasure.
Yeah, when we were talking the other night, it had came up that we think something extraordinary is buried there, not necessarily. Well, whatever it is going to be a treasure. Maybe not coins or gold and silver, but we have to. Of course, I think it's going to be some kind of, whether it's monetary or historical. But we had talked about the possibility that it is gone now. Somebody has claimed it or whatever. And you had said that, that you don't think that really mattered to him because it's more about the story and getting to the bottom of what's going on. And I found that really interesting. Dan Blankenship, when I first started watching the show, he seemed very gruff, unapproachable, tough guy. I would say maybe this is wrong of me, but when I often think of people like that, I think of Simple. I would go as far to say he is a pretty brilliant man. Do you feel that way after spending time with him?
Absolutely. The amount of research he did when I was on the island in 2003, he was reading the work of the very first mining engineering works by I think his name's, I'm probably going to say it wrong. I'm going to say Agrippa, but it was really, this was the model the Spaniards used for mining for gold in South America, using Indian slaves mostly. But Dan had studied that in detail, had mapped it out, had made all these correlations to Oak Island, that matched it up. He was just he was tireless both as a historical researcher and tireless as making a physical search of the island. He's found dozens and dozens of artifacts that are all fascinating. I don't know that they add up to a coherent narrative, but they all mean something. So Dan is a very smart guy and absolutely relentless human being.
Yeah. Another thing I would like to ask, I know we're getting real close here to the end, and I don't want to take up much of your time. I'll ask this, and then we'll see what Dave has, if there's anything left. The other night, you went over kind of where you're leaning towards what it could have been or how it came about. There's been so many people, Dave mentioned just a few of the theories. Can you tell us the one that you're leaning towards the most?
Well, I don't know if I can put it that way, but I would say that there is one theory that I initially thought was just ludicrous, and I almost dismissed it immediately, which was the theory that this was done by the followers of Sir Francis Bacon in the years after his death in the early 17th century. But, I felt sort of obligated to at least look at it and explore the claims and whatever. And I was amazed how much evidence there was to support it. I mean, how plausible something so wild became to me the more and more I looked at it. And, I give it a lot of attention in the book because I think it's just really compelling that something that, to me, sounds ludicrous, could be, sounds far-fetched at least, could have such a substantial basis for it. I mean, there are other theories that where the evidence is supportive too. I mean, the theory that it was the treasure of Havana has, some significant historical support, and that's a whole different kind of theory. But I find the Bacon theory, to me, it's the most fascinating and compelling. I'd like to believe in the Templar theory is the most exciting. It's the most thrilling theory, but there's been so much bogus, pseudo history used to try to support it that I was very dismissive, and then Gary Drayton found that Templar cross from the 13th century on the island, and I thought, well, I can't close that door.
Right. Is there any that you have closed the door on that you could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, somebody wrote a book that got some attention a few years ago, that it was an old pit for making pine, processing pine tar. And, when I really looked at it and the evidence that was used to support it, it fell apart completely on examination. I mean, I'm absolutely certain that's not what it was. Okay. It's not the French crown jewels, which is what FDR and his family, actually had been a story in his family. It came from his maternal grandfather that it was the French crown jewels buried on Oak Island. But I found that all of the crown jewels did disappear for a while, right after the French Revolution, but they've all been accounted for since, and it's not the French. So, okay.
We've got a question and I know the answer, but for our for people in chat, is GPR being used on the island?
Oh yeah, I mean nearly every available technology is being used. It's one of the things that is one of the most mysterious aspects of Oak Island is the way equipment fails. I mean, it's something that it's not like a made up narrative of the story. I've seen it with my own eyes. People bring equipment, devices, machinery that have worked all over the world to Oak Island, and suddenly they start to malfunction. Even the people who are working on the show, who they've worked on a lot of shows, the sound technicians and people like that, they said, it's just amazing how often equipment just stops or fails, and it's as if there was some sort of magnetic phenomenon on the island that causes it to happen. And I mean, it's to the point that the people who work on the show, whenever anything goes wrong, they just look at each other, shrug their shoulders, and say, Oak Island, because something happens there. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I can't explain it, and I'm not trying to, get too hooey-wooey about it, but there is some really mysterious quality to the place that has an effect even on especially on the most sensitive equipment.
To interject there, I'm sorry. Obviously, I used to practice other hobbies, and one of the things that I actually wrote an article that was published on the Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine, which has been relaunched and it reads to be put back on again. But we have a Neolithic burial chamber near to where I live called the Bridestones, and it's basically got two cells within it currently. And we had multiple occasions where battery-powered devices shorted straight away, even to the point that this occurred when the chaps from Nova Scotia were over doing the filming with us. And I contacted a gentleman at Manchester University to discuss, could this be not dissimilar to a battery itself? Obviously, natural geomagnetic phenomena is the Neolithic cairn, it suggested, were put into places of consequence from Stone Age man and such like. Could this be that it was an actual geomagnetic site where I know that there's a lot of natural fault lines right next to the site, in fact, and things that go underneath which all contribute to cause some form of energy to be dispersed? Now, could it be the case in my area where this was the reason why batteries were draining, and therefore could this be pointed to why batteries and such like are failing on that site because of potential geomagnetic fault lines or other natural earth energies, perhaps? And I'm not talking as in woo-wah earth energies, ley lines and such, but, you know, something that is a natural occurring phenomena.
Sounds entirely plausible to me. I mean, one of the things that Marty Lagina had discussed, and you know, I suggested, and he said he was going to propose, was to do what he called a magnetic survey of the island, to, you know, and to my knowledge, they haven't done that yet. I asked him about it when I was there in September, and he said, yeah, it's still on the list. It's still something I'd like to get to, but they hadn't done it yet.
So is this series, season 6, is this the last one that has been suggested in the UK that is the case, or will it be continuing?
Well, the answer to that, probably, knowing television, is, you know, does the show remain as popular as it has been? I think if it continues to be that popular, I mean, what Rick told me, and I believe him, when I was there in 2016, was, you know, if we don't find something significant this summer, if we don't make a significant find, I don't want to do another season. They found enough to keep them going, and then the next summer they found, you know, made even more remarkable discoveries, including, you know, pieces of human remains brought up from 190 feet below ground. So, you know, this year, I'm not at liberty to say what they found last summer, but my bet is there will be a season 7.
Ooh, I like that.
Now, obviously, I mean, my final bit, let's say, with yourself tonight, we've discussed all about Oak Island. We've discussed the history, some of the theories, and on other bits and bobs about it. We haven't actually given mention to your book per se, and that's the whole reason that you're on tonight, is because of the book and your involvement, obviously, in Oak Island. Can you tell the listeners a little bit more about your book and obviously the reasons that it was written, etc.?
Well, I mean, when they asked me to join the cast of the show, and they don't like to use cast, when they asked me to join the team in 2016, part of it was that, well, you wrote this Rolling Stone article, and, you know, you're going to be on the show as coming back to research a book. So I mentioned that to my publisher, who said, well, then you better write a book. So that was you know, how that originated. But I was writing it independently, and it's a little complicated and touchy to talk about. But eventually, I was convinced, and lawyers were involved, that this had to be the official book of the show. So it became the official book of the show with the History Channel logo on it. But I will say that the head of the production company was the main point person on that, and he really made that part of it. I mean, the actual, you know, whatever I had to do to the book, and there were some changes made, but they were relatively minor and relatively painless, because he was really a cool guy about that. Dealing with the network, however, and A&E, which owns the History Channel, that was not pleasant, and I don't have much more to say about it than that. But Prometheus and, you know, the people who were actually making the show were cool about it, and, you know, they let me leave things in that, you know, other people could say were critical of them and of the show, but they didn't force me to take them out.
And the book is available, obviously, all the main distributors. Currently, I'm on Amazon checking it out. It was published on the 11th of December. I think that might be, is that worldwide or UK? And it is available now, and you can get it delivered straight away. And there's also the Kindle editions already out as well. So people who do want to read more about the official story of Oak Island, Randall's book, obviously you can pick that up on Amazon.
Yeah, well, as of today, it's sold out on Amazon US. I'm hoping they'll replenish, but I saw that there are still copies available on Amazon UK. So that may go on the UK past more appealing.
I'm going to throw a link, or maybe somebody can throw a link up from the UK, the Amazon UK site, if we can get that thrown up in.
Already done it.
Oh, thank you, Dave. Thank you, sir. Oh, good job. I see it.
Would like to go into an actual bookstore, and they're in the U.S. I suggest they go to Barnes & Noble, which has been really supportive of the book, and I'm grateful for that.
Actually, I don't think we've actually got that in the UK. I think Waterstones is our main provider of
right. Well, Waterstones
conglomerate books.
Yeah, I think it's not going to be in their stores until January. I was
right.
told. Yeah. So.
Oh,
so
that's
there you
so
go.
Cool. I've got one final question, and I'm gonna put you on the spot. When I get my copy, is there a chance I could send it to you and get it signed?
Of course.
I would so appreciate that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
When I get my copy, I'll get a hold of you. And
of course, Randall, you may not know of the Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine. It's a free online source. Unfortunately, we've had a bit of a problem a couple of weeks ago. We've had to, we unfortunately lost the entire site, and well, I think it's basically rebuilt now with the aim of repopulating it. And we've got other bits and bobs that are occurring in the coming weeks and months. But if there's ever anything that we can do with or for yourself, any small articles or press releases or anything, obviously, please don't hesitate to get in touch, and we'll sort that, no problem.
Appreciate it.
Mike, anything else then with for Randall before he goes?
Same as well for the podcast. If you'd like to get any information out or updates, even if you don't have time to come on the show, if you want to drop me a quick line and, hey, Mike, this is what's going on, and I can announce it on the shows.
Well, thank you, Mike. That's a generous offer, and I may take you up on it.
I mean it. So please don't hesitate. And Randall, I got to tell you, this has been just a fantastic week for me to be able to talk to you not once but twice, and I've had a lot of fun, and I have really enjoyed myself and have enjoyed listening to you, and we really appreciate you coming on the show.
We certainly do. And if ever you are in the UK, perchance, drop me a line, because I could buy you beer all night and listen to you talk all night. I'm not as obsessive as some people, but it is the Oak Island is a passion of mine. So please feel free to give me a shout for free beer as well.
Well, that's an attractive offer.
What a great offer! You've never offered that to me, Dave.
No, Mike, we've spoken off air, and we can't say some of the things that we've spoken about on air, unfortunately.
Right. Okay, so we will. We're going to stay on, Dave. You got some more things you'd like to go over about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously, again, thanks to Randall, and we hope to speak to you again in the future. Obviously,
thanks for having me, Dallas. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Randall. We appreciate you coming on.
Take care, Randall.
Okay, what else were you wanting to?
Well, obviously, I've got this book in front of me. It's called The Oak Island Mystery: The Secrets of the World's Greatest Treasure Hunt by Lionel and Patricia Fanthorpe. Now, for some people in the UK will remember, especially of my age, Lionel used to be on a program called 40 TV, which was basically, people remember him as the Harley driving vicar. He wasn't ordained. I don't know in what denomination, but he was ordained. vicar in some denomination in, I think it was Wales. And what an absolutely fantastic bloke. A lovely bloke to speak to, very, very down to earth, very knowledgeable. And he's wrote a number of books, and obviously the TV program regarding the Forteana and such like. But this book, it goes back some years again. I mean, Lionel must be in his late 70s, early 80s, at the very least now. And there's photographs of him in the book going right back. And some of the links, I think some of the information and links that people have come up with over time, some of them are a bit out there. The likes of the links to Rensley Chateau, maybe. Other strange and peculiar things, people who are psychics claiming to know what's there and where it is and whatnot. Obviously, there's a hell of a lot of things out there that are, to me, complete bumcum. But it remains that Oak Island mystery is a mystery. To me, something has took place there. But, and this is where these questions come in, Mike, and it's something, obviously, if we had all year, we could discuss them. I mentioned earlier about the alleged similar shaft on the neighbouring Frog Island, which Randall gave as an explanation as to why it probably isn't there, but he's heard it himself. But there's some questions. I forgot my page now. Lost my page. I've linked it. All these bloody what they call post-it notes in my book, and I've lost my page. Right, I've got them. So, to try and understand the Oak Island money pit mystery, the investigator must attempt to answer these questions in connection with the artificial beach, the drains, the filters, and the flood tunnels. Okay, so remember I asked earlier about why there's no historical documentation about any workforce or engineering works taking place in 1700s and whatnot. It's only in 1795 when the three boys found the area that this actually come to fruition. But the questions are, and I'm sure most of the listeners would be able to say, yeah, fair dues, that's a good question. Who had the engineering and administrative skills to plan and organise all of this? Who had the necessary workforce to available, voluntary, coerced, enslaved or otherwise? Who had the time to keep the workforce on site for several months while a huge task was completed? And from the information that we know of, it is a huge task, or it was a huge task, as it's turning out to be today. Who had the essential resources and equipment available to feed and supply that substantial work force for the duration of the original money pit construction? Who had the necessary motivation to initiate the whole amazing project in the first place, and the stamina to see it through to a satisfactory conclusion? Who believed that the contents of the money pit, the mysterious X, which is the pit and its flood system was built to protect, was really worth all the time, effort, planning and organisation? So, taking all them questions into account, Mike, and we say that something's there because we know something's there, it's been proven historically on numerous occasions, all them questions can be asked as to, there's definitely something there, but what is it and why?
Talking to Randall, some of that has changed for me. I never thought of the pirate theory because here's my thought. If you're a pirate and you're plundering the seas and you're hiding your treasures, you want to get back to those eventually. Why make such an elaborate this island wasn't inhabited. Why not pull up to the island, spend a day burying it 10 foot deep? Because who wants to go through the hassle of burying gold and silver that you plan on using again at these kind of depths and doing, all these booby traps and all that? That never made sense to me. But through his research, Randall had said that there is islands, I forget the names of the islands, where they did exactly that, but I still don't believe they did it here. This island was uninhabited we're talking at a time when, you're wanting to get back to it. And what he was talking about, it was groups of pirates storing their finds. So maybe in that case it was, and I just doubt that was done up there for that purpose. I mean, you want to hide your plunders, but you don't want to hide it so well that if somebody does stumble on it, then nobody ever gets it because of the booby traps and stuff. In that time period that we're looking at, they could have pulled up to the island, buried it 10 foot deep, covered their tracks, and nobody would ever find it. So I think it's a cache of historical importance myself.
But when we're talking about the pirates, to counteract your argument, or not so much your argument, your question there, maybe you could also take into account that there was a Spanish coin found, which fits in with the plundering and such like. There's also the coconut fibers that have been found in the bay, which make up part of the filtration system to the drains. And they, obviously, the coconut fibers, they've already said on the show that they've come from sort of Caribbean area, where the pirates were, well, in my historical knowledge, spent a lot of their time, which let's be fair is based on Pirates of the Caribbean, probably. So
no, that is true. They spent.
But again, for every question and every answer, for every theory and anti-theory, there still lies. Well, I can throw this in, Mike. Maybe that could point to that, and you'd be like, well. So, if you were to say, I definitely don't think it's Templar. Well, the cross that was found on the last series is very, very, very much like the ones that were in French on the wall in the castle there.
I love the Templar theory. Whether somebody like Randall has knowledge, the research. He's been there, and I know that doesn't sound like his favorite theory, but. And I'm sure part of it for me is because it is, I'd like to think that some of them escaped. And we know some of them escaped, and we know that, that there were possible trips and stuff. I mean, there's even been, I forget the rock found here in the United States that they believe came from the Templars. So, I don't know. I like that theory the most. I mean, we know that they were in Jerusalem, that supposedly artifacts were found in Jerusalem, brought back. I like to think it's that. Do I have any clue? No. But I hope someday. I just, for some reason, like to go through that much work to bury gold and silver you plundered that you want to get back to. I mean, they didn't steal this stuff to hide away. I mean, maybe hide away for short periods, but to hide it away to this extent just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, hell, they could have pulled up and dug down 2 foot, buried everything, and covered it up and came back to it at any time. Why would you?
Totally agree, Mike.
Yeah,
but the question is still to me, for instance, right, in the UK, there's an island called Anglesey. It's not of a similar size. It's quite a big island. It's just off the coast of Wales, North Wales. If something was taking part on that island, maybe it's a bit big, but you'll understand where I'm going with this. Or let's say an island of a similar size that's off the coast of the UK. Surely people on the mainland or the headland would be able to see people coming and going to the site, be it passing over from the short area in Nova Scotia itself, by it coming at sea from afar. Surely somebody would be able to witness the comings and goings there. There'd be campfires, so you'd see smoke. There'd be all sorts going on. Why isn't there any historical documentation locally saying this has transpired, this has taken place, we've witnessed this?
Well, there is. Well,
people who've gone over to the site and, and I'm not talking 1795 onwards. I'm talking when potentially the site was actually first created.
Well,
There's no written documentation.
The Indians of have you heard this? I think it was on Oak Island, or it could have been a book I read or something else I watched, that the Indians in that area, you got to think that area was not populated. It was. I mean, there were American Indians, or not American Indians, Indians in the area, but there wasn't. It's not like over in the UK where you've had people there forever and somebody would have seen. I mean, the Indians possibly seen, but the point I'm making is the flag that the Templars had, the Indians, it's not a flag there. Whatever it is almost identical. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah.
And there's been some talk about that. I don't know. I like to think it was the Templars, but we could probably sit here and go back and forth for days. It's fascinating, and that's where this is so interesting. And I've seen on the show now. I got to be honest. It's been a while since I'm going to try to binge watch when I have time and go back through it. It's so interesting.
It's also the good thing about this program as well. It is so worthwhile watching to me as an avid viewer, to yourself, to everybody else who watches it. But it's also spawned numerous other, for me in the UK, especially in this case, numerous other programs. I mean, obviously they created the Curse of the Civil War Gold, which was. Rick Lagina was involved with. I think it was Rick. I obviously get them mixed up. The Curse for Civil War Gold, fantastic program searching for the gold. There's one not dissimilar on the History Channel, Hunting Hitler. It's not dissimilar. It's made in a similar manner by probably the same producers and such like. And the one I've been watching most recently would be the Treasure Island, Snake Island one. I can't remember the exact title of that. Treasure Quest, Snake Island. Mm-hmm. And again, this is following people around doing exactly the same thing, but this is obviously on a worldwide scale where they're following people around. So it's great that the Curse of Oak Island came along to introduce, for me, other programs that you see what I do, Mike, when I'm watching a program like recently the Snake Island one, if they're talking about something, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting, I'll be straight onto the internet to research that part of what the program's about. Mm-hmm. Which is good for how many people will do that, and it expands your knowledge or your fascination in different things. So it's kudos for the Curse of Oak Island for creating lots of mini Oak Island program, let's say. Yeah. And again, then there's more questions for us as human beings as to the ifs, whens, whys, and whats of them programs and the truth behind. I mean, Forrest Fenn, did he really bury treasure, or is it just a publicity stunt? There's so many different things in the US. I mean, there's one in the UK, a very, very, very little known one in the UK. The Harry Potter books, they go looking for the different items which have got a part of Voldemort in. That's actually the basis of that is on the 7 great lost treasures of Britain, the likes of the Camelot sword and whatnot. But there's lots of different alleged treasures in the UK, which is very, very. I didn't even know about it. Somebody said to me 10 years ago, "Did you know this is based on that?" I went away and looked into it and found out all these different missing alleged treasures in the UK.
I love these stories like this and history. And real quick, I want to say something. Neil, he missed the show. He's just now jumping in. I want to tell all of our listeners, we are on iTunes, we're on iHeartRadio, and my YouTube channel. All the episodes go out. Plus, you can always come back and listen here on Spreaker, and you can also download on Spreaker. If you download it while you have Wi-Fi, you can listen to it in your car or anything else. So, I mean, there's just a million different ways to get it, and there's other sources that I'm not even aware of that you can get the show. So, I mean, there's so many ways to to listen in or download. You can even go to allmetalmode.com. And when you, I take that back. I do not have the UK show up. I actually redid the website, had it all ready to publish with the UK show, and I lost my computer. It crashed. So I've got to go back and redo the website, add the UK show. I'd completely redone the website. But I'll tell you, if we're going to be talking about treasures and mysteries, I'll tell you one that fascinates me that I would watch a show on, and I would love to know more, is the Giants, the legend of the Giants here in the United States, and I think you guys have some over there in Europe. There have been several cases supposedly of giant skeletons being found, double row teeth, but they say that archaeologists get their hands on them and they are quickly taken away, and it's hush hush. Allegedly. And I found a website, and I know, don't believe anything you hear and only half of what you see. But there's a website that has there's actually I think the website is Giants of Ohio, which is where I'm from. And they talk about these mounds. There's a lot of mounds. There's the Snake Mound in Ohio. There's mounds all over. And it talks, one of the big things of the website is it tells you all the library, all these different libraries that have articles from the 1800s of newspaper accounts of giants being found. I never tracked any of them down, but I have talked to a couple people that say that they are there. And, I know, there's a show that they explored that but didn't come across anything where a guy supposedly found some remains. But that fascinates me. What's your thought on that? Do you think it's ridiculous, or do you think there's a possibility?
You see, being involved in the areas I used to be involved with, the paranormal ufology and such like that, the giants, people claim they're from the other planet, the ninth planet of our solar system, where Goliath was from, and it's all modern. It's all going to come back around one day, and the giants will be back. The giants were our forebears, etc., etc. It's one of them. I don't know. I've seen programs about it, but I am delighted to say that in the coming months, a very, very close personal friend of mine, Steve Mera, he's going to be coming onto the show, and some of the things he'll be discussing, you can ask him. He'll have much more knowledge of things like that than me. Steve's continued. He's been in that subject a lot longer than I was, and he's still going today, and he's doing more and more. One of the things he recently was involved with, there was a mummy found in Peru, if I'm not incorrect. In fact, I'm just going to pull it up onto Tinterweb. A three-fingered mummy was found in Peru. Could this be a new species? And Steve was lucky enough, along with a gent called Barry Fitzgerald, I think, to go over to Peru and to take part in the whole process of this mummy being looked at, and the DNA taking place, and the carbon test and such like. And as I say, Steve's involvement in that side of things has progressed rapidly over the past few years. In fact, what I'm hoping we could do with Steve, because he's been involved in that many different mysteries, let's call them, is to have Steve on as a regular guest. And obviously, I think the Giants would be something that Steve would be able to talk as. So, if you're happy to talk about more things mystery-wise, even if it's for just one show, Steve has said he'd be happy to do that anytime, as long as he's in the country. I think he's in Glastonbury today for the 21st of December. Tomorrow, obviously, being the shortest day, it's one of the solstices. He'll be in Glastonbury, which I don't know if you know, Glastonbury Tour is supposed to be quite a spiritual location, so he's down there covering things there. So yeah, we can have a look at all sorts. But as I say, lately he was involved in the alien mummy that he went over to Peru, and I'm sure Steve would be able to discuss that at length with you.
I would love that. Yeah, to me, it's all somewhat tied together. I mean, metal detecting can be mysterious, and we find things that are out of place, or it brings a lot of mystery to it. And I've always been fascinated with stuff like that. I'm very open-minded. Another one of my favorite TV shows is Ancient Aliens. Now, when I say I'm open-minded, I'm also very skeptical, but there's been things that make me laugh that they try to make connections with on that show, but then there's things I see and it's like, well, that's weird. That's, some of these monuments, these ancient monuments where these carvings are just beautiful and you can't even see, chisel marks and stuff. And, it makes you wonder, I think there's a lot of things out there that we don't know. And definitely. I am always interested in any of that. The giants of the Ohio Valley is a big one for me. Something that I think the American Indians, Bigfoot, for example, their oral passed down tradition is there were Bigfoots.
But how many alleged, let's call them varieties of Bigfoot are there in the world? Again, this is a lecture that I've actually heard Steve do about the different varieties in different parts of the world. In China, you've got one. In Canada, is it called Yowie? You've got obviously Bigfoot. You've got the abominable snowman, Yeti. You've got so many different potential varieties. Are they related in species, and have they just, if they do exist, have they evolved into what they have today by the of the evolution process in the area they are, let's say?
Yeah, I don't know that I believe in them, but it makes me curious. Just like Ancient Aliens, something that I have come to personally accept, if nothing else, is this. How do you explain all these pyramids all over the world and all these huge, we've got them in South America. We've got one in the United States, or a couple in the United States. We've got them obviously in Egypt and other parts.
China, Bosnia.
Yeah. How do you explain here? To me, this is something that has come, that in my mind has come from that show, is these people on these different continents were talking to each other somehow, some way. There was contact. I find it hard to believe that you have pyramids all over the world without some kind of influence, whether it was between themselves or something else. But, I think at least you gotta at least in your mind wonder, you have to at least think, hey, these people must have been talking to each other. They must have been traveling like we didn't realize, something. Does that make sense to you?
It does. One area of, I think, when we, not long after the Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine launched, again, Steve's involved with a lot of things, advertising and promotion wise, and he's involved with a company called Zohar Stargate. Zohar Stargate were putting on a massive event in London. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go. I was invited, and the likes of the chap off the Ancient Aliens with the hair all up and what have you, the excellent Mimi, let's call him. He was there. Eric von Daniken was there, and such like. And basically, it was a UK visit for Eric von Daniken, and as part of the agreement that saw the Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine advertising the event, we were given access to numerous Eric von Daniken articles that we could use at will to publish on the site.
Oh wow!
So I've actually got them to come back on in the future. Unfortunately, and he has been not so much proven as a hoaxer and whatnot, but there is suggestions that some of his work isn't brilliant, let's call it. But for me, Eric von Daniken, Again, I don't subscribe to a lot of his theories, but my dad had Chariot of the Gods at home when I was little, and I was obviously reading books very young, and that was one that I read. So it's brilliant that we've got access to the Eric von Daniken documents, but at the same time, a lot of people, when we do publish them, turn away from it because of their beliefs in the philosophies of Eric von Daniken and what they believe as factual. Unfortunately, in a world where we exist, human nature is that you have the right to thought and belief. So you can't knock somebody else's belief with aliens, with giants, with anything. I've got my own beliefs. You've got your own beliefs. Eric von Daniken has, maybe he's got it for. And interestingly, for those in the UK, I think it was last week, there's been an absolutely massive redevelopment of Blackpool announced. Now, I don't. You'll probably know Blackpool for the Blackpool Tower and all manner of arcades and such like, piers and fun fairs, if you've heard of it in the United States.
Yes.
But there's been a massive redevelopment that's announced, which is taking part basically an Eric von Daniken world, which is it's taken up a massive site. It's going to be hotels, casinos, fair rides in relation to the Chariots of the Gods and such like. So it looks like Eric von Daniken will be bringing masses of jobs and opportunity to redevelopment in the northwest of the UK. So that's a good thing in some respects.
That's cool. Yeah. Neil Standish said, I watched a thing on Adolf Hitler and aliens once. It was very strange and interesting. Hitler, why was he so into archaeology and sending these archaeologists all over the world? I mean, I think so many people think of, I know here in the United States, a lot of people think of that time as, that was so far off, and they don't take a lot of that serious, or, they look at it as so long ago. That was in modern times with vehicles and tanks and planes and nuclear weapons. It was very, why was he after all these?
I think, again, it's down to belief, Mike. Belief drives the human race, and in Adolf Hitler's belief that there were certain objects, artifacts that could increase the power threshold of the Third Reich. Obviously, the Spear of Destiny was something that was allegedly looked for at length. The Ark of the Covenant, things like that were looked for by Adolf Hitler, who had a massive belief in the occult, allegedly. Human belief is something gets into your head in some respects about the Spear of Destiny, and you believe it exists, you're going to search for it forever. Oak Island is a classic scenario of that. People believe that there's something on Oak Island, so they're going to continue to do what they're doing until someday they're proved either correct or incorrect. And then if they are incorrect, somebody else will probably take over.
Right. I'm sorry for the laughing. Dean Stanton I'm saying that wrong. Stanton, isn't it? He wants to Stanton. He wants to know if aliens will be building that in Blackpool for the.
Well, apparently there's going to be a floating restaurant. I don't know how they're going to make that, but then I'll try and find the article actually and put it on for Dean and such like to read. Von Daniken.
That's funny. Yeah, it just made me laugh when it popped up. I was just watching chat, but So
here we go. Blackpool plans reveal for a new 300 million tourist attraction on Golden Mile. They're proposing 17 acres was proposed theme of Chariots of the God, based on his adventure novels. They're calling them, saying they're not real there. Ancient caves, monuments of Easter Island, trips into outer space, roller coasters, a Bowes Park, rope courses, climbing walls, laser tag bumper cars. The UK's first flying theatre, a 5D experience which uses virtual reality for an immersive adventure. Obviously, massive regeneration and expected to bring over 600,000 people a year, but a lot of money in somebody's pocket, perhaps, as well.
Right.
I'll just put that link on the chat room.
I think most people in metal detecting, would love to talk to people who can talk about some of the stuff we've just now been discussing, some of these mysteries and stuff. I think that's why many of us got into metal detecting. And, I would like to talk to bottle diggers and insulator collectors and stuff. And it doesn't have to be all metal detecting, but yeah, if you can get him on and talk about some of these mysteries and theories that are even a little bit out there, I am all for it. And I think
he certainly will. He's already promised to. He'll definitely be coming on at some point. Obviously, myself, yourself, and Luke are currently in the process of tying down names for the new year. So we've got a set list of a few people up at the moment. I know Gary Blackwell's coming back on in the UK in the new year. We've also got a second guest who is involved in Oak Island as well. We've got a set a date with him.
I'm sorry, who was the last one?
I forwarded the email, the information this morning about the gent. Was it this morning or yesterday? There's a guy off Island whose name eludes me at the moment because I've closed all my signed out of everything. Yeah, we'll try and get Gary Drayton on certainly. I think one of my friends, John Webb, who hopefully will be listening tonight, he commented yesterday on me talking about tonight's show, and he said he tagged Gary Drayton in it. So I'd love Gary Drayton to come on, because I'm sure and I think we can call him a lead figure in British metal detecting due to the fact he's known by so many people and he's made so many discoveries and he's been doing it for so long. I think he can be classed as one of the UK's lead metal detecting figures. I'd love to be able to get him on, not just to talk about Oak Island, but his career within from bottle digging all the way through to today.
Well, not only that, he came here to the United States, and even before then, I believe, before Oak Island, he was he was on the Treasure Coast down in Florida finding some really incredible stuff.
Yes, he did, yeah.
So he's a very accomplished detectorist. Yeah, I would love to.
But again, it's one of them possible that he might not be able to appear due to contractual obligations with History Channel. We don't know what he may and may not be able to do, but he certainly would be a great guest. Yeah. And as I say, looking into the future next year, next week's show, we'll be having a multiple guests talking about not just metal detecting, but I don't know, Christmas presents that they may or may not have had. And I think we may even be having some form of, if you say a word, you have to take a shot. A bit of a drinking challenge for the night as well.
I'm going to Steph is working that day. I'm going to have to stay somewhat sober. But yeah, so I will have Randy. I might try to see if I can find a babysitter, and because I've really been looking forward to we need a good drinking game night for sure. So. For a bit of fun next week, as obviously as it's between Christmas and New Year, we don't want to put people out to ask them on as guests in a large capacity next week. We do want to have a little bit of fun. We do want to keep the continuity of the show going, and obviously speak to as many people as we can to get to know a few people a little bit better, perhaps. Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Are we going to have Addicted to Bleeps on, Chris?
I have no idea at the moment. I know Luke's been liaising with numerous people, so and we can't ask him because he's up for work at 3:30, so he's fast asleep now, dreaming of me, no doubt.
I want to say something that's really been on my mind before we sign off here, and when we had the mix up or the issues with Skype and everything, and he came on a few weeks ago, he had asked, how do I feel? How will I feel now with the Rudis coming out and me loving it so much, and how will that? He alluded to what'll be my favorite or whatever, and I just want to say, and this is in all honesty, there are so many detectors I love out there. And there's more that I'd like to get my hands on. I'm not one of these people that it's one detector for everything. They all have their purpose, and some have more purposes or multi-purposes. I pick different. I don't think I ever got around to that, Dave. He'd asked that, and it kind of, somehow I don't remember. But I've actually laid in bed and thought about that, him asking me that, and I feel like I never got to answer that. And I know that sounds silly, but I guess what I'm saying is I don't care what comes out on the market or what's new. I mean, the Rudis is definitely in my top 2 right now. And I suspect it'll stay there for a long time. And with this new update, it might become my number 1 favorite. Mm-hmm. But, it doesn't take away from I still have an AT Pro. And although I don't use it much anymore, I still love it. I think it's still relevant, and it has its place. So I'm not one of these guys that's just one detector and something else comes out and that takes over and that's all I'll use. There's so many ways to use and a detector, and it has different uses for me or different places I want to use one versus the other. I still love the old Tesoros. Matter of fact, I just picked up another Tesoro, and that's looked upon as old technology. Some would say obsolete. I disagree, but yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Dave, are you ready to wrap it up, or do you got more?
Certainly am, Mike. Certainly am. No,
yeah.
You're fine and dandy. Just to give a mention to as well, you mentioned before about the show's availability in different areas. I also started a few weeks ago doing a weekly newscast. It's about 15 minutes long, just with the top stories of the week, and that's also available via the Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine website or Spreaker. Look for the Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine if you're interested in that. It started off me reading it, which sounded a bit boring. So I've shook things up a bit, tried to change a few things. Oh, and the other thing, of course, I must apologise, Mike. I created a video this week with the help of numerous YouTubers and podcasters, which basically was for the relaunch of the Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine. And for those in the UK wishing to know a little bit more, I've had to take out of account overseas readers for this. We have a competition on the end of the video. If you go to www.archmdmag.com/relaunch, you'll be taken to the page. It's got the video on to look through, and at the end, it tells you enter the competition, where we've got a XP pinpointer, kindly donated by Regdons, and a Black Ada digging trowel, which was donated by Dave Clark, one of our listeners. So if anyone in the UK would like to take part in that, pop along, have a look at the video. It's only about 8 minutes long, and follow the directions to enter.
Tim asked you to put up links, and I agree. I'm going to say I love that you're. I'm trying to talk here, and it's not coming out right. I love that what you're doing on Spreaker with the little 15-minute bit. I think that's brilliant for people who want to stay in touch and keep up to date and don't, maybe they don't have time to read all the articles or whatever. I love that little bit you do, and I think that was brilliant. You talked about for people who are blind or disabled in ways that they can do that. That's brilliant, Dave, and I think that I wish you a lot of success with that.
Thank you, Paul. Well, as I say, it's just I didn't really have much. I've done a lot of radio work in the past in other guises. I'd never done anything in the form of a podcast until you'd asked me to help out. Obviously, I've enjoyed doing this so much. I felt is there anything else I can do? Obviously, I'm not at the point where I'd like to be able to host my own show, but I thought it's something I could do that's personal to me. I can do it in my own way, and it may help people who can't read, who are unable to read through whatever reason, even if it's just to read because they're too busy. It can be listened to in the car. It can be listened to anywhere. It's there. And yeah, I'm enjoying doing it. And obviously, Luke's passing on information and such like. So there you go. That's it. I'm enjoying it, and it is what it is.
I'm glad. Yeah, keep that posted. You know, I haven't seen it since the first one. I haven't listened to it since
I've done one every week. It's on. I think it's on episode 4 or 5 this week.
I'm missing them, so you need to post those more. Post them in All Metal Mode UK so I can catch those.
Right, yeah, no problem.
I thought maybe you quit doing it or something. I didn't know. I hadn't seen it.
No, I'm actually enjoying it. So, yeah, it only takes, well, you know yourself, you know, it can be classed as, well, it can be classed as easy in some respects doing it. It's, you know, I record it and then I put it online. It's, well, I say 8 minutes. The last one was 15 minutes long. I think I started rambling a bit in that one. So it's a bit of, well, it's not so much a bit of fun. It's something that a lot of people, Mike, and I'm sorry to digress. A lot of people have always thought that myself, when I launched the Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine, I was in it for what I could get. I'm spending many more pounds in relation to the website and whatnot, the running of the website and legal costs, let's say, than I would ever make doing it. I've been lucky to receive a few items for review, which have been reviewed. And obviously, you know, I'm lucky to be able to receive them, but this is a passion of mine. I'm very passionate about doing it. If nobody sending me anything, I'd still do what I was doing.
Right.
It's not an issue in any way, shape, or form.
Dave,
yeah,
if I thought you were trying to get rich or something, I wouldn't have you. I wouldn't never ask you to be a co-host. You know, this is the same here. It costs me money. I've gotten things to review and stuff as well, and to write my articles, and I love that. It's the reason I went from writing for the magazines, which I've had over 40 articles published over the years in metal detecting magazines, to my own blog, is so I wanted to do reviews and I wanted to write truthfully about them. But yeah, more money comes out than I could ever take in. And,
but don't tell Steph.
Yeah. Well, hopefully she's not listening this long, because I've really rambled here at the end, but you know, I think sometimes people think that, and I don't care. They can think what they want, but this is out of my pocket every month, and it's out of my pocket every month for my website and stuff. And it is definitely outweighed. But you know, I have never. Well, I don't want to get into all that. You know, I do truly enjoy getting my hands on different detectors and reviewing and testing and writing articles, and there's really a lot of articles in the wings. Part of my problem is kids 24/7, man. I mean, we do not have family here in Texas. It is so hard to sit. I've got so many things in my head. I'll write the title down and save it, and I've got a list of them that I want to do, but to actually get around and do it sometimes has been really challenging, especially running 3 podcasts now and everything else. But yeah, I've never got that sense from you guys. I know you do it for a love, and you've got a real passion for it.
And you know what makes it worse for me, Mike, is the fact that I haven't been out metal detecting for so long. You get all these fantastic stories, all these fantastic finds, and sometimes I'm so jealous, but I've just not been in a position I've been able to. So when it finally happens, I think I'm going to end up finding a hoard, which even if it's ring pulls, I'll be happy.
I haven't been out in weeks because of I am doing the podcast here lately in bed. That's how bad my leg is getting better. But I if you would have told me this was going to happen, this could happen from a spider bite, and it could turn into a staph infection, I would have never believed you. You would have never convinced me something could be so painful and lead to so many problems. But what am I 3+ weeks into this, and if I'm up for more than 10 or 15 minutes, I'm getting to where I'm up 10 or 15 minutes, and that's really good. But what's it been? We're going on 2 weeks since I went to the hospital and had it done. Had it cut open and everything. And I'm just now getting to where I can really stand up for periods of time, but it still is hurting. So, yeah, I am dying to get it. This is the time of year in Texas that I want to be out metal detecting, and it really stinks that I've been down with this. So I understand you.
Excellent. Well, Mike, shall we make a night of it? All these good people who want to go to bed, I'm sure.
Right, exactly. I want to say real quick before we go, Dean, if you don't stop all the jokes during the middle, I'm going to have to ban you. I can't be laughing in everybody's face. That guy's got some good jokes now. Good jokes. Thanks for all the laughs, Dean.
And again, thank you to Randall, of course, for coming on, and for Randall's publishers for acting as a medium between us while we were sorting everything out to come on the show. It's been a fantastic pleasure, and I'd love to meet him one day and sit down and talk for hours.
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic guest.
Okay, let's put these poor people out of their misery and end this show, Dave.
Okay, mate. You take care, and have a fantastic Christmas to you
too, Dave.
And to everybody listening, and to everybody else's families as well. I hope you have a great Christmas. I hope everybody's happy, healthy, and well. Eats lots of turkey, gets very drunk, etc., etc.
And join the after Christmas party next Thursday. Tune in. Good night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.